What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Timeout with Sko. I'm here with our guest, James Mayhew. He is a current strength and conditioning coach, has got his bachelor's in kinesiology, and has worked with pros like Juju Watkins, Draymond Green, Trey Young. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. So talk to me a little bit about just your journey, how you kind of got interested in wanting to, be on the performance side and where that passion started.
So I started training 10 years ago. I knew I wanted to start training back when I was in high school. A lot of my teammates were really involved and really tapped into like just the whole basketball culture in LA. One of my teammates' dads was training a ton of NBA players at our high school gym, and I saw that, and I kind of realized like this is what I wanted to do, and just kind of figuring out my lane and my niche. I got into strength conditioning. Then I ended up majoring in that, majoring in kinesiology in college. Started working ever since I was 17, 18 years old when I started, and then right after college, I started working with Trey Gaines, which was like an amazing opportunity. And that kind of launched me into working with professional athletes, a lot of NBA and NFL guys. And ever since then, it's just been hit the ground running,
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on because I was a former player myself, and I've been through countless like major injuries. And one of the things that I think for my career that would have been beneficial was to have somebody in my corner who knew about the body, how it moves, and just how important preventative sort of maintenance on your body is. Now, for your clients specifically, like what sorts of preventative things do you use with them to kind of help, in their career, and like how important to you is preventative care, along their career and journey?
Well, what's so funny with all the preventative maintenance stuff and the corrective stuff is really just all the boring stuff that people don't want to do.
Right.
And so and it's super simple. And even it's just the simple stuff that you have to repeat over and over and over and over. And like when you're younger, we're both younger, and we're playing, you don't want to foam roll every day. You don't want to activate the right way every day. And now being older, and I've seen with my most successful athletes, those are the ones who take the small stuff very seriously, and they're very diligent in what they're doing and mindful in like those small details. And I mean, you've seen with Etai with the kids at Core, like just foam rolling every day, doing a proper warm up every day is huge. A lot of corrective exercises, so anything that's hip mobility, ankle mobility, just all those concepts that a lot of people overlook, and like all of us overlooked when we were younger. You get older and you realize like this was all the stuff that I needed to do to avoid all these injuries. And then in terms of like preventative maintenance, building strength is a huge way to build resilience for your body. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Like a lot of your issues can be solved simply by getting stronger. And then a lot of the rest of your issues can be solved simply by working on your mobility. And so when you combine strength with flexibility and your movement's nice and fluid, then you're going to be a well-rounded athlete.
I love that you mentioned that because when I worked for the Lakers, one of the things that was really different at that level than I had really ever been taught before was like these guys would actually lift before a game, before they're going to play, after a game.
Yeah.
And that's something that's, been not something that I've experienced growing up, right? Like I've always been told, don't lift before a game, right? It's going to wear your energy out. You're going to be tired. Your muscles are going to be fatigued. Can you talk about just the benefits of actually doing that and maintaining that, and how that actually will help you prevent injuries?
Totally. I think one big thing is the way we think about lifting is way different now than it was 15 years ago. Because like you remember like you're in high school and coaches are loading the bars up with a bunch of weight and you're doing more bodybuilding type lifting, which never made your body feel good. It just kind of made you sore. And the way lifting is now, especially you're talking about guys lifting on game days, lifting on after games, you're never really going 100% of your one rep max. So to explain that, that's basically saying when pro athletes are lifting, they're lifting in that 70% range of their maximum weight capacity, which makes it them able to do the reps with perfect form, as well as you're not overloading the body and overloading your muscles, so you're not getting too tired.
Gotcha.
And then in building that strength, I mean, you need most of your injuries are going to happen in tendon, the ligament area. And when you're building strength, you're literally increasing the resilience of those tendons and ligaments, which is going to make you able to sustain a long season.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's great and really valuable for people to know because I do think that uh, things have changed a lot as far as our knowledge, as far as access to different information.
Yeah.
And so, I think in saying that it's good to continue to learn about it so we know things that are best for our body to
Yeah,
sort of maintain longevity.
totally.
Um, Now, let's say I'm an athlete and I'm coming to you
Mhm.
and I need to get stronger, I need to get faster. How can I do that without taking away mobility? Because mobility, like from my understanding, is something that we all need to really gain strength in a lot of ways, right? Like we need to be able to reach full reps on things or full
Yeah.
motion on things to be able to kind of gain that muscle. So, how, as a coach, are you helping your athletes improve on those things while also maintaining their mobility?
It's one of those things like mobility is something that has to be incorporated daily. And so your hip mobility, ankle mobility, even your back, your mobility in your thoracic spine is huge in terms of sprinting and increasing speed. And so you're kind of balancing out building strength, working on your speed and mobility. And that should be a triangle that's happening every session. And so you should never, if you're training with a coach, you should never be just a strength day or just a speed day. You should have little bits and pieces with every day. It's kind of like building a plate. Like you're not just going to eat a whole plate of chicken and then the next day just eat all salad. Like if you had the option, you're going to split those up. And that's how your training should be too.
Got it. Got it. If I was a player now, right, and I'm working with you and, we're kind of keeping that in mind, what are things that I should be doing on my own outside of our time together that would help me?
For all my middle school guys, I tell them all, I don't need to be there with you for you to hit your push-ups, pull-ups, upper body strength stuff, especially for younger kids, is something that you can do on your own. You should be doing all day, every day, working push-ups, pull-ups, anything body weight is going to be great. Older guys, more for when we're not together, it's more of the maintenance stuff, like the stretches I'm giving you to do. A big thing, especially high school and especially in college, is the workload is really high, and in overseas, very high workload. And so just for instance, a lot of times if someone has a tight lower back, that issue isn't the root of that issue isn't coming from your back. It's usually coming from tight hamstrings or tight glutes, which very simplified is basically tight hips. And so when I get guys that have been complaining about lower back tightness, we need to go to the root of the issue. And now every single day, even if I'm not with you, you need to be loosening up your hamstrings and your hips and working on that mobility. Also, for instance, and you can always kind of move down the chain. So if you have a back injury, it's probably coming from the hips. If you have a knee injury, then you want to look at the ankles. And so a lot of people with knee pain, knee stiffness, or knee tendonitis, you got to look at how their foot is contacting the ground. And when you think of foot contact and just movement in general, the only part of your body that's interacting with the ground ever is the feet and the ankles. And so if someone's tight in the ankles, then that pain is going to shoot up and you might see it in the knees. And then even worse, if the knees aren't mobile, then you're going to feel it in the hips or lower back. And it's just working up and down that chain. But yeah, each age is so interesting because with younger guys, we need to build strength. They're not going to be stiff. With older guys, they're already strong. So it's usually the opposite, like we're working the mobility.
Nice, nice. I love that you mentioned the chain because, like, for me, I've had major knee surgeries. I've had 3 ACLs on my right knee and a broken
Oh, man.
femur on my left knee. So, I've had a good mix of everything kind of happen. I've
Yeah.
had some bad ankle sprains, things like that. But I think as I've gotten older, I start to realize, wow, this is all connected, right? So my knee hurts, now my hip hurts, right?
Hmm.
Now the hip hurts, now my back hurts,
Yeah.
right? And it's really figuring out along the way, like what muscles you
Yeah.
need to really focus on that, or what areas are tight that you need to focus
Yeah.
on to help. And I think it's a good point. Sometimes it's not just where the injury is happening, right? Or where the pain is coming from, but it's from all of the other things.
Totally. And one thing with the ACL, like I've been recovering from my own ACL tear. A lot of the times with the ACL, it's an overuse injury. And so you have two types of injuries. You have a chronic injury, which is something that's built up over time, which ACL oftentimes is a chronic injury from overusing that ligament. And then you have an acute injury, which is you just got elbowed in the face, now you have a broken nose. And acute injuries you can't really treat for. They're more of like accidents. But chronic injuries you can kind of trace back and see where they're coming from. And you made a great point too of like, all right, if the knee or maybe it's the hip, and a lot of times one side's going to compensate for the other. So for instance, Clay Thompson was recovering from an ACL on his left knee, and I'm pretty sure he tore his Achilles on his right, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, understanding that balance and like trying to find the root cause, I think a lot of coaches have gotten so much better at. Because back in the day, it was just like, yeah, just put some ice on it, it'll be good. It's just, things are so different now, 10, 15 years later.
Speaking of, sort of maintenance, talk about recovery.
Mm,
Because I think this is something that's super overlooked.
yeah,
A lot of times now, right, it's this sort of mindset of grind, right?
yeah,
Like we have to grind. And I was actually listening to another podcast where somebody was talking about grinding actually means to wear down. And I thought that was like,
yeah,
wow, such a light bulb moment of like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense.
yeah,
And, I think in a lot of ways, like that's the culture, right? Grind, work hard, be a dog. But like on the flip side of that, like recovery is just as important. And
yeah,
you talked about how some of these injuries, these chronic injuries, major injuries, are coming from this overuse.
yeah.
So how do you implement recovery, and what are things that you talk about with your clients in regard to like the importance of recovery and what that should look like, for them, whether they're in season, out of season.
Totally. Well, you made a great point. The biggest thing with recovery, in my opinion, is actually letting your mind get a chance to recover.
Mm.
Because when you're in that grind, go mindset, you can get worn down mentally. And it happens to all of us, especially us in the training realm. Like when you're going nonstop and you feel like each day is a huge opportunity, it's a great place to be in. But then you also have to have the confidence in yourself to be able to take a day off just for yourself mentally. Because I think so many people get worn out on this journey. Like if you're trying to do this, if you're a high school kid and you're trying to play pro or play in college, like it's going to be a lot of hours and a lot of days, and it adds up, and there's times you don't want to do it. And even for us, like when you're training nonstop and you're building a business, it is a grind. And to avoid getting worn out, you have to take time mentally first. And I tell guys all the time, like you need at least one day a week where you're not doing anything. You're getting in the sun. You're not even thinking about basketball, because mentally, as soon as you can get refreshed, subconsciously, now your body's gonna be able to relax. And in terms of physical stuff for recovery, I'm huge on sauna. Sauna and steam room is huge. Um, Ice bath, very important, especially with guys that are dealing with a lot of inflammation. And then even smaller techniques such as scraping. So,
I hate
uh,
scraping,
yeah,
but
a
it's
lot
so
of
good for you.
yeah, a lot of college programs will have their players scrape. And then there's flossing too. And flossing is, you take the band, wrap it tight, and you go through your mobility. And those are a lot of recovery things. Even you see pros getting body work done. A lot of that recovery stuff isn't just laying out cucumbers on your eyes. Like a lot of recovery stuff is still hard work. And that's why I tell guys your recovery should be a part of your work week, 3 to 4 days. So if you're on the court 5 or 6 days, you're lifting 5 or 6 days, you probably need to be incorporating recovery 3 to 4 of those days. And then you need one day off, just completely off mentally.
Now, let's say that I was coming back from an injury, let's say an ACL injury or tear of some sort.
Yeah.
How do you help players, whether, basketball or football, how do you help them manage the like mental component of that? Because, for me, that was the hardest part of it all, right? Like I mentally can get myself to the place where I could do the exercises and push past the pain and get myself to back to playing, but that road is really long.
Yeah.
And, I think it would be valuable to share like how to kind of mentally stay engaged during the recovery process. And then also like the return to play. Like, how do you help players get over that sort of mental burden and like fear of re injury?
Totally. I think with the recovery process and the injury being so long, you got to keep things fresh for people and you got to keep mixing it up while maintaining your same principles. And then getting over that final hurdle of like actually playing, the only real way to do it is get people into live action situations where they have to get out of their own head. And you can mimic and do all the closed space drills that you want, but until you put someone in like a competitive situation where they get out of their head and they just do it, and then afterwards they might realize like, oh, I haven't pushed myself that far. That's what I've seen to be the biggest thing, because especially with any type of knee injury, like you're gonna limit your movement naturally just as a protective mechanism. And getting an athlete out of their own head and out of their own way and just putting them in that competitive environment, usually that competitiveness will take over. And that's when they kind of flip that switch and all of a sudden they're doing stuff that they used to do.
Yeah, a cool story that I have about this is I was working with Drew Hanlon and we were helping Myers Leonard come back from injury. He had an ankle injury that he had surgery on and was rehabbing it. And one of the things that we would do in the workouts was Drew would put his foot like almost right under Myers' stance just to kind of get him feeling comfortable with shooting and understanding that somebody's going to be probably that close to you and just getting comfortable with like that closeness on the floor.
I like that.
And over time, like when we first started, he didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
He was like, you're too close. Like, I'm going to land on you. And Drew kept saying to him, like, I promise, like, I will move my foot. Like, you're not going to land on me. And you could see that sort of, like, mental block or barrier that he was having just to literally shoot the ball again.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like, a lot of times, we talk about injury and we talk about, right, it's a grueling process physically, but the mental component, I think, is even tougher.
Just as much.
So you train both NFL players, NBA players. What's the difference, do you think, in regards to training? Because obviously you guys are working on different things, different positions, you're working on different sorts of lifts or different sorts of mobility stuff or, things of that nature, loading in different ways.
Yeah.
Talk about the differences in training in regards to like different athletes.
The thing with basketball is especially now, is such a positionless sport that a lot of the training is going to look the same. Whether you're a point guard or a small forward or a center, everyone has to do all the same stuff because you might switch. If you're a big, you might switch on a 3-point line and now you're playing defense just like a guard. With the NFL, positions are so different and body types are so different that the training varies very differently. So like we had a guy for a couple off seasons, DJ Reader. He's a defensive tackle for Lions. He's 6'4", 330 pounds. His baseline for just lifting a normal amount of weight is way more than anyone else I've ever worked with.
Right.
You know, wide receivers and corners are more similar to basketball players, where we work in the same weight ranges. A lot of change of direction, a lot of deceleration, a lot of top end sprinting, and then with basketball, one thing that's different from football, basketball has way more lateral movement. And so with all my basketball guys, we're working lateral movement, crossover step, lateral movement to vertical jump, which is much different than football. It's not so much lateral. Guys are more so running in a straight line. And then making cuts and change directions off of that. But one thing that is universal throughout is that deceleration component, because your ability to stop and be under control is literally going to dictate how fast you can get to your next move. And that applies for any position in football, any position in basketball.
You know, the one thing that nobody ever told me really in my rehab was about decel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't say we didn't work on it, but it was always about like the acceleration, being able to like develop the strength to push off.
Yeah.
But when I was first rehabbing from my injury, and, you know, I think I was 3 or 4 months, and, you know, you start running, I started realizing like I can't stop.
Yeah.
You know, I would take that like big loop and circle
Yeah.
like at the end of the run, because realistically, like that's like if you have strength, it's coming from the decel part, not necessarily. I mean, you know, some of it's the acceleration, but a lot of that is decel.
Yeah.
Talk about how that's like grown. You know, decel training has grown within the last couple of years. Like, and we see it on the court all the time, right? Our slow steps, the Pinoy steps. You know, we're starting to the slower Euro steps. Like, we're starting to see that more and more. But also, like, that's really hard to do as well and be like on balance and under control. So talk more about that.
So deceleration is something we work on every single day. You've probably seen Itai doing it with the kids. Being able to go up from a higher stance on your hips to dropping low and being on balance. There's single leg deceleration, 2-foot deceleration. Then you start mixing in different planes where you're going lateral deceleration, sprint deceleration. And the way it's grown is pretty insane, because I remember even when I was first learning about training, it was not really main point that people would talk about. But then you get into situations, especially in a rehab situation, where you're running and you're like, all right, I feel great when I'm running, but when I need to stop, like I can't stop. And so it's very interesting too, because once you start thinking about it, the more you're on balance, the better you're going to be able to be for your next step. And so even you'll see guys doing lateral slides, and if you see a guy reaching for a slide with his foot, you're like, actually shorten up that distance so you're on balance, and then you're going to be quicker to your next slide. Right. So I think the way coaches have approached deceleration has gotten so much better. It's one of the main, if I could choose 3 main components for all of my training, it's in the top 3.
What are the other 2?
I would say acceleration, strength, and mobility. Sorry, deceleration, strength, and mobility. That would be my top 3.
Okay.
And I would put them in that order too, because your ability to decelerate is going to allow you to use your strength. And you can have the strongest person in the world, but if they're not on balance, then that strength isn't really going to be able to transfer.
Right. And amongst the like different sports that you train, I know you said mainly football and basketball.
Mhm.
What sorts of injuries are most common? And let's like kind of stay with basketball. Like specifically within basketball, do you see players, facing a lot of times?
Number one, sprained ankle. Like if you
That is
haven't
the
sprained it,
worst feeling ever. A sprained ankle. Oh, sick to my stomach just
and
thinking
it
about
usually
it.
happens on like stupid play. Like you might be sliding and it tweaks, or you might land on someone's foot. Sprained ankle is super common. Patellar tendonitis, especially with high school kids, because you're ramping up, you're doing more work than you've ever done before, and so a tendonitis is one of those chronic injuries we're talking about where you have this build up, build up, build up, and your body's just not ready for it. And if you're not doing everything in your power possible, developing that patellar tendonitis, super common. And then, I mean, unfortunately, basketball is going to be a lot of knee injuries, ACL, MCL, like, because it's any sport you have a lot of change of direction, then you're going to open up the possibility for the ligament to get damaged just because of the rapid twisting movements.
Is there something that you do with your clients when you first start working with them that can kind of tell, like, maybe some sort of like evaluation or analysis that can sort of measure like their susceptibility to injury? And like, does that lead your programming with them?
Totally. The easiest thing to spot, even when coaches are first starting, I tell them easiest thing to spot is if someone's squatting and their knee starts going inwards, which is a valgus movement. That knee going inwards shows us that you already have a predisposition to develop a bad knee injury. And so when we see that valgus movement and we see the knee moving inwards, we have to do everything possible to strengthen the quad and the hamstring. And then also you got to think about angles. So if my knee's getting pulled inwards, that probably means my groin is tight because the groin is going to pull the knee inwards. And it means the IT band is weak because we need the IT band to pull back this way. And I remember I had a really good coach I was learning from, and he just told me, he goes, can only pull. Muscles just pull different directions. And so when you see a movement that you don't like, you want to loosen up the side of the body that's pulling the movement the wrong way, and then strengthen that opposite side.
That's great. That's really good. So, having worked with, middle school athletes, high school athletes, professional athletes, for somebody that is aspiring to be a professional, whether that's in the NBA or overseas, what do you think separates the pros that you've worked with? And like, what sorts of things should younger kids be sort of practicing or implementing now that could help them as far as their off-court development, within strength and conditioning?
Biggest thing I've seen from the highest level of people I've worked with is number one, the consistency. Just showing up 4 or 5 days a week, even some guys 6, 7 days a week. Showing up when you don't want to, showing up when you're tired, when something hurts, just even getting in the gym so we can work on something else. That's the biggest thing. And you've probably seen that too, is like as the years go by and you see players go, it's not always the most talented players that keep playing. It's usually the people that actually, one, love it. You got to love the grind. And then two, you just got to show up every day. And even if it's not going to be your best day ever, as long as you're showing up and putting in effort, then you're going to see those results stack up over time.
And how would you say you balance sort of the science of, the work that you do, but also like the coaching aspect of it? Because, we talked about before you came on today that you're in the business of service, essentially.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, your relationships, how you talk to people, how you make people feel, the way you're able to communicate things, like, all of that is coaching in a lot of ways.
Yes.
So how do you balance the like science portion of like, okay, these are the things that like we have to do, but also understanding the human portion of like, okay, this is where this player is at, this is how they're feeling mentally. Like, what can I do to best help them?
I would say it's 80% coaching and emotional intelligence and just understanding your people and connecting with them on a real personal level, and 20% science. Because especially you get to the higher levels, everyone knows the same information. And so if we're all working with the same info, what's going to make this player want to come back and work with me year after year after year? It's all those small intangibles.
Yep.
And you know that, like working with guys on the court, like you got to know when it's a time to push a guy to learn a new skill, and then you also got to know, like, based on personality, like, all right, this person's pretty stuck in their ways, this is how we're going to go about this. So yeah, I'd say it's 80% coaching, 20% science.
Yeah. And how do you feel about load management right now? Like, and that's a huge thing, you know, in the NBA. But like we watched basketball for years before that, and load management was never a thing. How do you feel about it? Do you feel like there's truth to that? Do you feel like there's benefit to that? Or do you feel like sometimes we just have too much information and, you know?
Well, I'm so happy you asked this question, because I talk about this all the time with my boys. You know, you turn on a game and you're excited to see someone play, and then you realize they're sitting out. Part of it, I'm not mad at the NBA guys for doing it, because 82 games is kind of too much. I think NBA, and this is a whole separate conversation, but I think NBA would have a lot better product if there was less games. It's part of why people love the NFL, is, you know, every game's going to matter. And then you got to go back to like who started load management, which was the San Antonio Spurs. And in those years, they were winning 60 to 65 games every year, sitting guys when they needed to. They kind of pushed the NBA into eliminating back-to-backs, which has been huge. But I think with a lot of injuries, like Jalen Brunson's ankle sprain a couple of weeks ago against the Lakers, that's a freak injury. Like, you could load manage all you want, but if you land on someone's foot and you sprain your ankle, like, that's just is what it is. And so I agree with guys not playing when they don't need to, because especially for someone like Draymond, when you have 4 rings and you've been in the league for 12 years, this game in the middle of November versus the Charlotte Hornets on the road isn't really that important in the grand scheme of things. But for the business of the NBA, like, they want the stars out there. So it's kind of like a two-edged sword, because for the players, I'm all for load management. But as if I was running the NBA, and the NBA is a business and they're trying to promote their business and give the best product, load management isn't great. And so I'll always be on the side of the players, and I'll always tell guys, even in the off season, in the summer, like, if you're not feeling it, you need a couple days off, take a couple days off, because taking 3 days off so you're good 6 months from now, I think is a good trade-off, you know?
Yeah. What is you think the biggest sort of focus that you have as you work with some of your like older athletes? Like, I know you've worked with Draymond, who's closer to the end of his career than the beginning. I know you've worked with Candace, who's just recently retired.
Yeah.
How are you still helping them like maintain strength, you know, have good mobility, be, you know, as much injury free as possible so they can play as they continue to age?
With the older athletes, you're doing so much ankle mobility, hip mobility, and then strengthen their back as much as possible. Because you just think about getting older and their strength is there. Their mind is already going to allow them to play better than everyone else still. And so you're really just trying to do preventative maintenance every single day on those small areas.
Now on the flip side of that, like if I am a younger athlete, I don't know, maybe give me 1 to 3 things that you think they should add to their routine in order to help them perform better, in order to help them, stay injury free?
Yeah. It's so funny because when I start with younger athletes and I give them this stuff, it almost immediately works great. One is foam roll and actually use the foam roller for more than 2 minutes. Like if you're foam rolling for 10 to 15 minutes, you will feel better. And just by feeling better, you're going to get more out of all your workouts. Two, for younger athletes to work on. After each workout, we do ankle mobility. A lot of ankle mobility exercises, working with resistance, body weight stuff. And that's another thing of when your feet aren't sore and your ankles feel good, you're going to be able to perform at a higher level. And then the third thing for younger athletes is really just the nutrition and the hydration. So many of these college kids, especially kids now, they just grew up eating DoorDash and they just don't really know how to fuel their bodies. I had one athlete, I'm telling her to eat fruit and she's eating acai bowls. The acai bowl has like 50 grams of sugar, and sugar really messes with your recovery. And so like eating a regular apple and an orange is going to help you so much. And fruit is huge because fruit is basically water. And the more hydrated you are, the clearer you think, the less cravings you have, and the better you perform. And so, yeah, with young athletes, I think all of us could step up our nutrition, and a lot of the younger athletes could step up their hydration.
When my brother got drafted by the Lakers and he was a rookie, Kobe was actually coming back from an injury. And my brother was like doing rookie duties. And he said that every morning, like, Kobe would want him to bring him something from McDonald's.
Really?
And it's crazy. And I know that like he's improved on his nutrition over time throughout his career, but we hear about that all the time. And I think that, and you hear about like things like Anthony Edwards says about, well, I just eat whatever, right? Yeah. But I think like it's understated a little bit, like of how important it is. Not even, I think now kids are like, oh, well, I gotta get carbs because I need to put on weight. And I think that that's great. But also like on the flip side of that, the things you do put in your body are important to fueling your body in the way that you need and want it to perform.
Yeah. I mean, I tell all the high level people I work with, I give them the analogy is you're basically a Ferrari. And when you go to the gas station, there's 3 levels of gas. If you have a sports car, you have to pick the most expensive gas, and you're going to have to pay a little bit extra, but you need that premium 93 gas. You can't get the 89. And that is basically what these athletes need to understand is like your body is your business. And so if you're spending an extra $5-10 per meal to eat healthier and feel better, that's going to pay out. That's a great return on investment that you're going to get in the long run.
Right. One of the things I was talking about with Etai the other day was we were talking about social media. We were talking about how that has impacted training and development. Obviously, on the strength side, but also on court side for me too. And I wanted to kind of ask you, like, I think now there's this like huge notion of like we put stuff out on social media in order to essentially gain traction, to gain visibility. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now are these sorts of complex exercises, and we're essentially like people are trying to reinvent the wheel in some ways to gain following. So for you and your business, like how has social media helped you? And also what sorts of things are you seeing on social media that you're like, hey, I think that that's actually not of value for players to know or to do?
Oh, man. Social media is such a tricky thing because there's people like you who are doing really good work and have built a following. And then there's people that are doing great work and no one knows who they are. And then there's people that are doing bullshit and then also have a big following. Yep. And then for the consumer, it's like, a lot of the consumers are kids and parents that haven't been around the game at the highest level. And so it's like, how are they supposed to sift through all this content and figure out what's important? And I think a lot of people are trying to reinvent the wheel and trying to do their own thing. And some people have done it and it's been successful. I think at the end of the day, if you're a trainer or a coach, you have to understand, like, all right, what am I trying to get out of the content that I'm posting? And then again, for most people, they're trying to build their business. And so it's like, if you know you're going to post stuff and get likes and get clients, like, that's a cycle that you want to repeat. So I try not to hate on people that are posting a bunch. But then I just also know from my own experience, being a little more private has helped me retain a lot of the clients that I've had, because that just adds a layer of trust.
Sure.
And something that, just for me, if I was an athlete and it's my third session with someone and we're working out and all of a sudden the trainer has the video camera up, that would just put me off, and I wouldn't want to be in that environment.
Yeah.
Especially because, like, I don't, we're all people at the end of the day, and people think these athletes are like 2K players where they just like load up and they're ready to go. And like, these people eat like us, sleep like us, and you're not always going to feel your best. You're not always going to be looking your best. And so, for the social media, I say take everything with a grain of salt. And then also, when you're going to a trainer that you found on social media, try to talk to some of the people they've worked with beforehand, so you can get a better idea of who you're going into the gym with.
If you could give trainers one piece of advice, what would that be?
Give trainers one piece of advice. I would say, especially once you're a couple years in, stop watching what everyone else is doing and just really refine on what you're doing. When I got a couple years into training and I was watching these videos, and I made it a point to just like stop following any other trainers, just so I could focus on my own thoughts and my own philosophy on things and get more knowledge from the books and write it out on my notebook. And because if you're taking input from a 1,000 different places, then you're just going to be average, And so I think my one piece of advice for trainers is to stop listening to so many other trainers.
That's actually funny.
Yeah.
Last question I have for you. Let me say it like this. What would you want people or players to know about performance training?
I think performance training is mandatory. It's what's going to separate you at the highest level, because once you get to college and the pros, everyone has the same skill set. Everyone's shooting around the same percentages. They can do all the same finishes. And so it's like, what is going to keep you on the court for a full season and what's going to separate you from other guys? It's your athleticism and your durability. And so when you're looking for a sports performance trainer, sports performance coach, you need to be looking to build your athleticism and increase your durability so you can outlast everyone that you're competing with. And the sad reality is you're competing with a lot of your teammates. And so there's only a finite number of these spots, and you being available and feeling good is going to help you get better every day, which is going to push you closer to that finish line.
Well, thank you so much, James, for all of the insight that you shared. I'm really excited for people to see this episode and just to learn more about you, to learn more about what you do, and also to learn about why performance is so important and goes hand in hand with your on-court development as well. So I want to thank you again for coming and stopping by. Last thing, for those that are interested in learning more about you, is there a place that somebody can go find you? And if you could just say that into the camera so, people can know.
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram. Just type there's JAAAA. You'll find it'll pop up. Or you just type in James Mayhew. You could look up Athletic Gains. I've been working with them for last 6, 7 years, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank
It's
you so
great.
much.
Yeah.